Discover the Our MedTech Lives podcast, where industry experts share their career stories, key achievements, and insights into overcoming challenges in the MedTech field. Hosted by Zilko Rima and Kash Ikram.
Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. As we go older, we don't have to worry about just the diseases that may kill us, but also quality of life and how well we're going to live as we grow. More of us grow older and older. In fact, the annual incidence of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's is about 1 million plus every year and 7 million plus respectively. There are about 11 million people worldwide who are living with Parkinson's disease, and 7 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease. Today, we're going to be talking to James Hamet, who is CEO of Vistim Labs, and they are developing a brain mapping software for the precision treatment of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Welcome, James.
Thank you so much for having me.
James, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background to start with?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm an electrical engineer. I got my degree at the University of Michigan. And while I was there, I became friends with a bunch of neuroscientists, and I started actually getting involved with neuroscience. I collaborated with a number of scientists at the Direct Brain Interface Laboratory at my university, and I started working on what's called telekinesis, or mind-controlled technology. One of my best friends at the time, Dr. Ramses Al-Qaid, and we built this system called Neurological, where you could control a remote car with your thoughts.
Okay.
And so we actually patented that technology. And so that's a bit about my background. I grew up in a physician family, and my father's a neuroradiologist. So I've always been passionate about the brain and doing things for bettering patient and human quality of life. And that's sort of how I got involved. Once I developed that technology, I started thinking, what else could we do in this space to help improve lives? And that's how I came up with Vistim Labs.
Tell us a little bit more what inspired you to start this as a company as well. I mean, one is having the idea, but to really start a company, it requires some efforts, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. Well, I was working on Neurological for about 5 years.
Right.
And in that time, we did many things that were really awesome, honestly. We were able to do mind-controlled robot cars. We were able to do mind-controlled virtual reality games. You know, if you've ever watched Stranger Things, we actually made our own version of a game that we're not using the same branding, but you know, you're a child locked in a federal site somewhere, and you have telekinetic powers, and you have to escape. You play the entire game using just your mind. And so we released that at SIGGRAPH. I guess it's about 4 years ago now.
Okay.
But so the reason that I started Vistim Labs is, well, I have Parkinson's in my family.
Okay.
My family members didn't survive. But while I was building Neurological, they were still alive. And the concept of mind control technology for me was a way to help them live better. Was a way for them to be able to navigate. I mean, Stephen Hawking was also a big inspiration for me, and I was hoping that I would get my technology out to Stephen while he was still alive in his wheelchair. I was sad to be basically 1 year too late, but then I had an aha moment, and my aha moment was I realized that patients in wheelchairs, over half of them are there because of basically preventable neurodegenerative diseases.
Okay.
I'm using that word preventable probably optimistically. But I'm talking about cerebral palsy, ALS, Parkinson's. Pretty much any type of neurodegeneration can ultimately put someone in a wheelchair, and over half of wheelchair users are there today.
Right.
And so that's why I had this moment of, maybe instead of creating better wheelchairs, what if we try to create better technology to enable better treatment? Maybe we can cut down on wheelchair usage. Maybe instead of trying to apply a Band-Aid to the problem, we can prevent the problem.
Right.
And so I had that market intuition, besides also, you know, being familiar with my father's work and knowing that the brain imaging that we have today is missing mapping. And if you've looked at cardiology 30 years ago, we also didn't have cardiac mapping. And as a result, many patients were dying.
Right.
And cardiac mapping comes out, the success rate of procedures goes up almost double, and cardiac deaths fall across the board by roughly 60%.
Right.
And so that has inspired me to take this approach of, well, maybe there's a mapping solution. And then there was one last coincidental piece that pushed me towards Vistum Labs. And it was that I was looking at how people's brains respond to stimuli while I was at Neuroable. I was looking at how people respond to arrows and people respond to audio cues. And I was designing the experiences based on their responses. And I noticed that depending on what I was trying to study, I had to use different stimulations. It was different if I was trying to look at is the person tired versus is the person stressed out. Different responses to different things were telling me different things about the person, including potentially their diagnosis. And so I connected with a professor of schizophrenia at Columbia who had designed this, basically an inkblot test that's digital.
Okay.
And he was looking at evoked responses in EEG to this inkblot test. And I theorized this will work for every disease, not just schizophrenia. And when we tried it in Alzheimer's with a lab that was right next door to his, we discovered something we weren't expecting.
Okay.
Not only could we tell the disease of the patient, but we could measure their specific level of amyloid protein, which today is only possible with a PET scan or a spinal tap.
Right.
And so I said,
think-
time to get started.
I think, James, not everyone who is listening to us is such an expert. I have your website in front of me, and the questions are like, is it an EEG? No. Is it a PET? No. Is it better than a PET? Yes. But can you tell us a little more, for us who are not experts, what exactly is this brain mapping? And so that everyone can understand.
We would say these are your traditional competitors, right? Taking a blood test, doing a PET CT. So maybe explain a little bit about what those technologies do.
Yeah, okay. So the tests of today are, the best ones are the imaging ones. So when you can see a problem, you can understand the problem.
Right.
And so what a PET scan does, you're looking at the distribution of proteins in a brain. You have MRI, which looks at the distribution of neurons in a brain, right? Fantastic. However, that's essentially just like doing an X-ray of the heart. Okay, well, I can see where the heart tissue is.
Yeah.
It's like looking at the cholesterol of the heart. Okay, I can see some weird protein thing that's here that's related to the disease. Okay, that's where we were in cardiology 30 years ago.
Right.
Everybody was getting statins, and
Yes.
it wasn't working. Now, what's missing is function. We currently have no way of knowing that this neuron and this neuron are not talking.
Right.
Because that's not reflected in protein, and it's not reflected in MRI.
Right.
So what our technology does, I'm still working on the name, but what I currently have is evoked potential tomography. And what that means is we stimulate specific neuron columns in the brain one at a time.
Okay.
And we use that to map the health of individual neurons in the brain. We're using EEG currently with this technology, and we've been able to reproduce PET images from EEG with this approach.
Okay.
We've also been able to show that the brain map is in fact more accurate than a PET scan with the patients we studied, and it's around 100, so it's not a large number. But that's essentially what this technology is about. It's spot stimulating sets of neurons, doing that 100 times, and then having very spatially accurate measures of health, because we're not getting our spatial resolution from EEG.
Right.
I'd actually love to use this approach with fMRI. I think that's a better modality. But we've been able to demonstrate that this approach, which we've patented, plus EEG, does seem to lead to better clinical results than a PET scan.
It's incredible.
We can predict future MRIs because we see the function. And if you've ever heard the expression neurons that fire together, wire together, it's a common quote in neuroscience, and it basically means the more this one talks to this one, the thicker the connection. The inverse is true. Neurons that don't communicate well eventually stop communicating, and that axon disappears. And if this neuron has no one talking to it, it dies.
Yeah.
Which means if I give you a therapy and the prediction becomes not as concerning, then we know the therapy is working.
Wow. Are you looking to disrupt the PET CT market? These are some big companies that operate in this market, right?
I don't think we will disrupt their business
Okay.
because of one reason. Their business is already not very used for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Ah,
Pets are more frequently used for other conditions. The other thing is that when they are used, a patient is deciding to pay for the procedure out of pocket.
okay.
And that type of patient probably still wants to pay for a full PET scan.
Mhm.
And the PET scan is unsafe to do more than once a year. So I think in the best case scenario, if you're a patient who wants the ultimate highest level of care, you will get a PET scan once a year. But in that intermediate time, you will use Vistam's technology, and we will be measuring you once a month so that you don't have to wait 12 months to see the effects of your therapy.
Work with other diseases, like I'm just thinking about stroke. Would this work as well to see which neurons are still communicating, or is it a stupid question?
That is not a stupid question. That's a fantastic question. I obviously have a hypothesis-driven approach here, and my hypothesis is that the majority of the brain is responsible for responding to stimuli. I think there's enough existing evidence that would suggest that that's true, especially if you look at fMRI images of the brain. The back half of the brain is the occipital region of the brain, the parietal region of the brain. These are regions that are known to be dedicated to visual perception, to navigation, to auditory. And so as a result, I believe that any neurodegenerative condition will at least touch this area of the brain in a negative way that can be observed. And so the areas that I'm most interested are the ones where it's the most obvious. Alzheimer's and Parkinson's might not seem like obvious diseases with visual and other types of sensory impairment. But if you think about the symptoms, the person is forgetting who they know. That's not just memory. It's actually that they can't see your face very well anymore. That's one of the reasons that they don't know who you are. And their memory actually is not as affected as we once believed, but their perception of reality is. These are patients who start to hallucinate. They're patients who start to lose their sense of direction. It's not just memory. It's actually their ability to navigate. And in fact, the very first gold standard test for all neurodiseases is called the clock test. And what you do in this test is you draw a clock. And if you are fully diseased, at the latest stages, you end up drawing half of the clock. Or you draw a clock that is, you can't see any of the numbers. And so that's clear and direct evidence that every one of these diseases impacts vision. And that vision, in fact, may be the first to go. If you look at how Parkinson's and Alzheimer's develop, they start off in the parietal region of the brain, which is responsible for navigation. If you look at traumatic brain injuries, those typically are in the back of the head. And when you're checking if someone's had a concussion, what the gold standard test of today is, follow my finger right on the screen or in real life. And you look to see, did the person literally see a flash of light, right? That's one of the questions. Right. So I think it's pretty well known that the study of perception is the best way we have today, even to understand these diseases.
So while you were talking, I drew a clock, and I'm happy to report I'm good. I can see.
You don't know. You need to show us. You cannot.
Yeah.
Tell
the clock
yourself
is going to look perfect to you. That's
oh my God. Okay, I would say the clock looks good, but Silke's face is a bit blurry. So results inconclusive.
Well, at least you didn't draw all of the numbers on the right side of the clock.
No, they're all right in the right place. I think so. Anyway, from my perception, that's at least. I think if I was a salesperson, I went in to see a clinician, right? A neurologist with your technology. It sounds too good to be true. Have you been doing clinical research? Have you published?
I love that question.
First question they always ask, right?
We probably should have started with this question because, when I was building Neurological, that was the experience I encountered all the time. Everybody said, this sounds too good to be true. It sounds impossible. The quick answer is that yes, we have evidence, and usually when I talk to doctors, there's an initial 5 minutes of skepticism.
Yeah.
And usually the skepticism is, oh, well, you're using EEG, this is QEEG. And
Right.
then I have to say, no, this is not QEEG. Let me explain what evoked potential tomography is. And then once I explain that, then usually the doctor gets really excited and wants to use the technology, because the truth is, there are still many aspects of my hypothesis I haven't validated yet.
Right.
But there also is a lot of this that I have validated. For example, we've done many clinical studies showing how our approach measures amyloid with the same precision as a PET scan, and even as a spinal tap. We can measure both for amyloid and for tau. We can predict the person's performance on a cognitive test before they take the test. And our mean squared error is very, very low. This is not classification. This is predicting somebody's score so that you can track it over time without actually having to do the test. And that's how we're starting. And so that's where we have the evidence for it. But yeah, I mean, even at Neurological, I remember people saying, oh, this isn't true. And I had a demo of a toy car that you could drive on a table. And I remember the first investor to write me a check, he drove the car off the table. When the car drove off the table, I was in shock. I was so concerned. I thought, okay, I lost this investor. The device isn't working. And he starts laughing. And he says, you know what? I did it on purpose.
Wow.
And I learned an important lesson that day. I learned that things have to actually fail sometimes for people to understand their limitations.
Yes.
And I'm still trying to figure out what that looks like for Vistum Labs, because the truth is we haven't found the limitation yet of what this approach is capable of. We are able to, like I said, map the brain functionally based on how neurons communicate. And usually when a doctor hears that, they think that's impossible with EEG. And so I hope that I get that question and that I have the opportunity to share the data with them. But so far, we have seen better diagnostic accuracy than a PET scan. We're currently doing disease differentiation trials, looking at Lewy body disease, looking at Parkinson's disease. And if we are capable of that, then we will be capable of something that's brand new. Because differentiation between Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, Lewy body, it's not something that is easy to do. There isn't an established technique. And most importantly, these are diseases that have subtypes.
I think, James, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's are also very emotional diseases, right? For the patient, but also for family members. So now I imagine that you can tell me the progression of the disease as well. But there is, especially for Alzheimer's, not too much we can do about it at the moment. So I guess it could be scaring as well. Do you think this will encourage more treatment options to be developed as well, but now that you can monitor progress?
Yeah, I'm so lucky that I almost never have to draw from my own imagination. Because, it's not like precision medicine is new. Precision medicine's been around for a long time. And in building my company and building Vistum Labs, it's helpful. My dad's a neuroradiologist, but I'm able to draw inspiration from cardiology, from oncology. For example, in oncology, how do we treat cancer?
Right.
We look at tumors and we see how big is the tumor and we make the tumor shrink, and that's how we know that the cancer's in remission.
Yeah.
This technology that we're building at Vistum is capable of that too, because we're showing the size of the disease, the size of the affected area, which is new, because currently there's no way to do that, which means that you can see it shrink. And when you're looking at cardiology, you have this functional mapping, which came after, the use of CT and X-ray and static images of an organ's function. And so we know that these methods work. We know the impact on care.
Right.
The patient is looking for answers. The family is looking for answers. And it takes about 5 years before they give up. And once they give up completely. But when you start to have these conditions, you want to know right away. And in fact, I've met a very large number of people who don't have Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and who still want to know. And that's because there's a strong belief that we can influence these diseases and we can prevent them. And I share that belief.
Yeah.
The reason that we don't have a cure is because we have no mechanism of proof. We have no Vistum labs that can tell you that the person's getting better. I believe that some of the treatments that are out there are in fact cures and have in fact stopped Alzheimer's. And the reason that I believe that, if I look historically at cardiology, some of those treatments were in fact effective. We just didn't know. They're still used today. But the other side of it is we just don't have a way to measure. And yet we hear patients self-report and say, I used to have Alzheimer's and now I don't. I used to have Parkinson's and now I don't. We don't know why, but there are people like that out there. And there are doctors like that. I treat Alzheimer's patients. My patients get better. Here's 20 patients who got better, and here's their testimony, and here's their scans before and after. We see that type of thing all the time. Now, it's difficult to use that information. That's why there's a lot of skepticism, unfortunately, for those doctors. I'm just saying, it's very complicated. And even those doctors who have successful results, they still can't fully explain why. They're doing 100 things to their patient, and they don't know which one's working, but the patient got better.
Yeah.
It doesn't replicate well. It's hard to communicate with another doctor and have them get the same results. So hopefully our technology allows for better communication between physicians. That is my true dream, because that is how we can make all of these diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, cerebral palsy, we can make them preventable so that patients do not have to experience anything more than their first symptom of disease.
Yeah, you'll have some common features that you'll be able to pull out across these patients and be able to categorize them.
And be able to communicate, yes. The fact that we're limited right now to protein biomarkers should be alarming, especially since the proteins exist in multiple conditions.
Yes.
A traumatic brain injury causes amyloid protein. And I personally think that the strategy of the blood test companies is actually to be a precursor for a PET scan. And so I think that there'll be step one, do I have amyloid? Should I get a PET scan? Then you get your PET scan. Now you know you need a treatment.
Right.
And now you start getting the treatment. But as we mentioned before, we don't know if the person's responding to treatment or not. So you need a monitoring tool. And that's where we come in. And we show, is the brain functionally improving? And importantly, does that improvement lead to symptomatic improvement? We're the only company right now that can show that in an imaging scan.
Okay, so here's the thing from me. There's a brilliant comic out of the UK called Simon Brodkin, who does a fantastic joke where he says, the nurses are on strike in the UK. The hospital doctors are on strike in the UK. The GPs, are they on strike? I don't know. It's been years since I've seen a GP. We know that getting access to healthcare in a lot of places can be difficult. I mean, his joke is brilliant. But I've read that the demand for care when it comes to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, really the demand exceeds the availability of neurologists.
Correct.
So can your technology then help in that demand availability scenario as well?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And my technology is an AI technology. So it does allow for some automation, which, helps when you have shortage issues. I want to start by saying my technology does not replace doctors. I want to make sure that that's very, very clear. My technology only supports them. And that's by design. I don't want to take any work away from the doctor. My parents are doctors.
Right.
So that's always number one in my mind. I think the best technology enables the doctor to practice better medicine. I want to fuel private practices. I think private practices are amazing. And not just for specialists, also for general practitioners. And so here is a technology that, you can make an argument it might be better used by a trained neurologist because of the wealth of information that it contains. But it also can be effectively used by a general practitioner. One of the aspects of our products, which we have not released yet, is the brain map itself. Currently, we use the brain map as a feature set of our generative AI models for producing these images. What that means is the brain map itself is not in the report. But that's something we'll be releasing soon. And that's something that I think is probably better suited for the neurologist, at least initially, because they'll be able to inform how that can be used with care. So that's just a quick thing. But I wanted to also share something with you, Cash.
Yeah.
In the US, if you have a neurological problem and you seek care, the lack of match is 25%. So 25% of patients don't get to be referred. The problem is that the number of these neurology patients is going up, and the number of neurologists who are graduating is going down. In about 10 years, that's going to become a 50% mismatch rate.
Wow.
And the field of neurology is going to, I think, unfortunately, probably going to become mostly GPs who handle those patients. And in the US, that shift has already started.
Okay.
The number of patients who are predominantly treated by their PCP is the majority for neurological conditions.
So hence why technology like this and enabling technology like this is so helpful.
And hence why, and we've done that on purpose by design.
Yes.
We designed this technology to be used by PCPs, even just by a nurse, right? In case the doctor is busy. I'll say that this technology is currently, it's really targeted for the private practitioners. I want to help make their lives as easy as possible.
Can you describe what the map looks like? Is it like an image of the brain with numbers, colors? What does it look like?
That's a great question. No, the map itself is not a product yet, as I mentioned. So we're currently communicating it with PET scan images that, are fairly, 90% accurate to the real thing, 95%. The official terminology we use is that we measure changes that are smaller than the change you might see in month-to-month variation, right? So that's the level of precision that you want and you need. That's what we achieve. To answer your question, the map currently it's an array of numbers. Each number does correspond to a subset of neurons that we're targeting with our stimuli, but we end up with all these numbers in a grid. And so it doesn't have a clean visual, but we will be doing an fMRI study in the near future. We're applying for an ARPA-H grant that I'm fairly confident we'll receive. Once we use this technology with fMRI, I can't wait to show you what that's capable of, because that's where we will have the exact spatial resolution of the exact neurons that we're stimulating at each moment in time.
Yes.
Do an update call.
Yes.
Then we'll do an updated call. Yeah. And by the way, anybody who has any experience with fMRI, when they hear about my technology, they understand it immediately. That is the fastest conversation I've ever had. If they don't, and if they're a general practitioner, and they run a private practice and they're looking at, new ways to practice care, I encourage them to reach out and learn more about Vistum Labs, because I'd be happy to explain what this does. It's not magic. It's actually quite simple. The patent itself is also quite simple. It's a simple idea. And once you wrap your mind around how this works, it's really not magic.
I think for us, it still sounds magic. But when I listen to you, James, I have the impression everything went smoothly, everything works. I'm sure you must have faced some challenges on the way. Can you share some with us?
Yeah, so let me say something even before that. You would think that somebody like me, who created mind-controlled technology, where at the beginning people didn't believe it was possible, they had to see a demo or, I'm a fake. And you'd think that after making it through all that time and raising a lot of money and building a successful business, you'd think that the second time around would have been easier. The truth is, well, maybe it was easier because there's no way for me to do an A/B test. But wow, this was really, really hard. And it continues to be really, really difficult. There have been many moments in time where I've had amazing partners that I couldn't pay. Raising money in the medical space is surprisingly complex and completely different depending on which disease you go after, because these investors use thesis model approaches. You'll have investors who only invest in cerebral palsy, for example.
Right.
My technology, we only have clinical evidence with schizophrenia and Alzheimer's disease currently. And we're collecting evidence with Parkinson's right now. But that's actually a good point. The fact that I don't have preliminary evidence of Parkinson's precludes me from any Parkinson's specific investors. And in fact, the majority of these disease investors only invest in therapies. So there is a huge drought in funding for diagnostic companies. I'm an optimist, and the way that I wake up in the morning and move past these things is that I know that at the end of the day, in everyone's hearts, we're all on this planet to try to make it a better place.
Absolutely.
This is indeed a difficult challenge, and everybody wants it solved.
Yeah.
So I've gone through many difficult moments where I didn't think I was going to succeed, but it is much closer now than it ever has been before. We will be launching our product in May of this year. And what I'll say that has led me here is just, I've never given up. And I read this story once. It's called The Surrender Experiment. It's a little crazy, I'm not going to lie. Basically, it's about this person who builds a warehouse in a random forest. He has this experience where he's building the warehouse brick by brick. Technically it's wood, so wood, but log by log. And as long as there are logs to build the house, he builds. And there's this moment where he picks up the last log that's in his storage and he puts it on the house, and he goes back to the storage and there's more logs. So he continues. And the reason I say that story is because that has been my experience, especially with this business. Moments where I think we're out of money, moments where we've effectively run out of money if you look at the balance sheet, and there have been true miracles. There have been people who have come to me and who have said, I will not let you give up. I will help you get to the next point. And every time I've run into a challenge, there has been somebody who believed in me somewhere, and they've been at the random places. There was even a moment where I was at the airport waiting for a plane, and I got off the phone with somebody, and the person next to me says, hey, I heard you're dealing with this. Let me help you.
Wow.
So that's what I'll say. That somehow the universe has conspired with me and is helping me bring the solution across. So at this point in time, I do not believe I can fail.
I think you shouldn't worry. I mean, a lot of people doubted Uri Geller's mind control abilities, but I think they're all convinced now. So keep going. And it is amazing. Your house analogy is a bit bitter for me right now because I'm currently homeless thanks to my wife buying a house and rebuilding the new one.
Well, so where are you right now, physically?
Physically, I'm in the Orsi Academy in Belgium, which is a robotic surgery training center. Google it. It is absolutely amazing. But yeah, spending a lot of time in hotels at the moment while our house gets rebuilt and our kitchen gets relocated. When my wife hears this, she's going to break my neck. But yeah, joking aside, the entrepreneurial journey you hear many times is not an easy one. It's not for everybody, right? There are these moments, aha moments you mentioned earlier. There is these angels that come in when you think, okay, we need to close the doors. But when you have a brilliant idea, good things seem to happen. Talk a little bit about, for an idea like this to prosper and turn into a business, you needed investors, right? What was the journey when it comes to bringing investors on board? What kind of investors have you had? Have they all been angel investors? Are you using VCs? Love to hear a little bit about that side of your business.
I think that starting your own business is so much more difficult than anyone can imagine. This is my 10th business. I have a lot of experience starting businesses.
Right.
I've had 6 failures.
Mm-hmm.
I've had about 4 successes, and I feel absolutely terrible for the first-time entrepreneurs who learn the hard way the cost of minor mistakes.
Right.
I would encourage anybody who's an entrepreneur to surround yourself with mentors who've done it before. Truly surround yourself. Don't pay for services. Don't talk to people who haven't done it before until you have that support system around you, because you will make mistakes that will follow the company. And they could be small mistakes like, a bad legal agreement, giving shares to somebody who doesn't help you. There are so many tiny things. And so I'm just going to say, please, please, please surround yourself with entrepreneurs who aren't asking for your money and who want to help you. I'm one of those people. If you're an entrepreneur out there, you can reach out to me. I'd be happy to share my time just to help you.
Thank you.
Now, in terms of investors, yeah, it's gotten so much more difficult as well over the years. I would say, investors are primarily looking for an easy opportunity to make money. And that's code for they're looking for you to do all the work, including all of the risk. What they want is really, they want to give you a loan, except it's a loan where they also own part of your business, which doesn't make any sense, in my opinion.
Right.
And this is mostly the VCs, right? They want to wait for you to already have revenue, which honestly, you should just get a loan for. At that point, you can get a loan, you can pay interest. It's not a big deal. But that's been my experience with VCs. That for the most part, they don't care about businesses that are the pre-revenue, because that's when there still is risk. And they'd rather just not deal with any risk whatsoever.
Okay.
So that's what I'll say. I would say avoid VCs. There are very few exceptions, and I know those exceptions. There's a fantastic group called Go Ahead Ventures that I'm going to blast because they believed in me and they helped me out enormously. But they're very rare and far between. So focus on angels. And the way that you focus on angels is by being an honest person and doing what feels right in your heart. Don't be a salesperson. Don't beg people for money. Simply state the facts of what you need, what you're doing to get there. And probably the most important is to show that you have a way to avoid failure. In my case, it was my perseverance. I had a number of investors wait to see that I ran out of money, wait to see what I would do in that scenario. And then they became my saving help in those situations. And I'll also say that, look at charitable activities. I've met some of the most important investors. One of my very first investors was on the board of a charity that I was also on the board of. And so look at giving back.
Yeah.
One of the best pieces of advice that struck me and I still follow to this day is this: be as human as possible. That is the true secret to entrepreneurship.
You said you are ready to commercialize in May. So what is your plan now? It's an exciting moment, right? Once I was the first salesperson in a company and I did the first revenue in history. I know it's such an exciting moment. So how do you prepare for this moment? And are you doing it only in the US or internationally? What's your plan?
The truth is that there is so much I need to do to prepare for this. I've been working on the technology for 5 years, and clearly 5 years has not been enough time in the sense that I'm working, sunrise to sunset every day. Medical is particularly hard. Yeah. But what I'll say are, you're asking me what are the things that I'm doing. Well, I'm going to launch starting in the US, and I'm going to start with a small number of private practices, and I'm going to try to be distributed with a clinic in California, a clinic in Florida, a clinic in Texas, and a clinic in New York. That's my ideal, because I receive patient emails all the time, and that's where they live, that's where they want to go. So I want to refer these people to clinics that are nearby. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is that we will be bringing this around the world next, but we have to start with neurologists first, in the US first, primarily because, it's marketing, right? It's storytelling. The best story is a product that starts with neurologists who are specialists in Alzheimer's, and then here is their testimonial. And so we're starting with the hardest people to sell to. Let's get them to like our technology, and most importantly, their feedback. Because our product probably isn't ready for the whole world to adopt yet. There are little ways we can improve it. And so we have this small group. It's actually 10 clinics who have signed letters of intent with us. We have this small group of clinics that is willing to be first adopters of the technology and share their feedback so that we can make it better and better and better every single day. And if you realize or consider that this is an AI company, you'll know that it's a better user experience, but it's also better algorithms, better results, better findings, more precision with every single patient it's used with. So I'm doing everything I can to make sure that those clinics are ready for us. And I'm also doing everything I can to make sure that we have a good launch. One of the things that we made a decision on last week is we will be presenting at the American Academy of Neurology. We will have a booth. We'll be right next to Medtronic on the floor. And so if anyone wants to be in San Diego, which is a beautiful city, by the way.
Yeah.
If you want to be in San Diego for the American Academy of Neurology event, then please stop by and say hello to us, because that will be our official launch.
Amazing. Yeah.
If you don't mind, can I say something? It's an ask to the world. If you know a neurologist who may be interested in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, we would love to talk to them.
Yeah.
I promise I'm not going to try to sell them the technology. I just want to learn and have as many interviews with neurologists as possible, because each one teaches me something different. And then the second thing is if you know somebody who's working on therapies, if they're a researcher maybe in a lab at a university, we are applying for ARPA grants. We're applying for some big grants, and we're looking for PIs who might want to be part of this work as awardees. And so if you know any of those people, please help me.
Yeah. So if anybody knows anybody like that, I think they should forward this podcast to them to listen and send them your contact details via LinkedIn or look at the link below. We can do that for sure.
I'm not asking for money.
No. Okay.
I'm asking for new friends, because you can't have enough.
Everyone has money. You can look me up on LinkedIn as well.
All right, Cash. The new entrepreneurs are going to go to you.
Yeah.
No, if someone has some spare cash they're throwing around, then
It's in
throw
his
it in,
name.
throw it in my
Cash.
direction.
Yeah. You guys have some pretty great names. Silk and Cash. You're gonna have a new business partner named Saffron who joins you at some point.
We need our own Marvel comic, I think. Yeah, for sure. Wonderful.
This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Our last and final question we asked everyone. Today, I hand it over to Cash because not only it's me, but Cash didn't ask much today.
I'm gonna ask the amazing question we ask at the end. So what are the 3 things you know now when it comes to this entrepreneurial journey you've been on that you wish you'd known then being the beginning?
That is so tough. Okay, 3 things that I wish I knew then. This is probably gonna sound unexpected.
Yeah.
But I wish I hadn't gone directly into entrepreneurship. I wish that I had started building a career somewhere else, built up some funds, and basically had a really solid plan B.
Okay.
And the reason that I wish that is because once you start entrepreneurship, you can't stop. You can't stop. And there are many times, however, in entrepreneurship where things don't go the way you expect them to. And, you can't pay people, you can't pay yourself, you can't pay rent, you can't pay legal fees. And those have some very real consequences.
Yeah.
I think it's necessary to go the hard route, right? And figure it out, those challenges. But if I had, fallen a bit of a traditional for a couple years, I think that would have prepared me for a lot less stressful of a time doing this, because it's been exhausting. Is the answer. And I just feel so hyper specialized right now in the neurology field. If I had taken a pause and done a traditional career path, I could have spent that time going to conferences and doing a lot of exploration and building a big network. And it's starting to dawn on me just how much I've sacrificed by going essentially all in on entrepreneurship. So I just want the young entrepreneurs out there to really fully understand the level of sacrifice that you'll make by being an entrepreneur, and make sure you're ready to make that sacrifice. Number 2 is make sure that you actually talk to your customers from day one and only from day one. What I mean is every day since day one, never stop talking to your customers. Your customers will be your biggest champions. They'll help you design the best product. And by the way, they'll even be your best investors.
Yeah.
So I would say, if you could, interact exclusively with your customers. These VCs that have millions of startups applying to them annually, they're not going to fund you. It's not worth your time. And if they do fund you, I guarantee it's a bad deal for your business and for you personally. I'll say that there's a lot of hesitation. I've had a lot of hesitation with this. I used to believe that I'm lucky to have found a customer. Therefore, I don't want to ask my customer for anything more than being a customer. And I recently learned the lesson that no, that's not true. If they're your customer, if they're paying you, they're more than happy to also be an investor. So really, only talk to customers if you can. And maybe the people who reach out to you who want to talk to you also. But focus on your customers because they will help you more than anyone else. And then number three is, fortunately, it's not all about the money.
Okay.
You do not need money. You can get people to work with you for free. Don't report me to the IRS.
Okay.
I'm not saying to have people work and not pay them. I want to make sure that part's not clear. That part is clear, sorry. But what I am saying is that there are many people who want to be involved in startups and who are very interested in equity. And you can find those people who will work for you, with you, without getting paid in cash. Those are called co-founders.
Yes.
You need to find co-founders who will work with you, who will be at your side, whether they're paid or not, because they're in it for the equity and they're there for the mission. My final point is there's one exception to that.
Okay.
The one exception is make sure you work with experts.
Yes.
Co-founders are amazing because they'll be there through the thick and the difficult. But when you need something specific done, hire someone for an hour, hire someone for 2 hours, get the best expert you can so that it's done one time and done forever. That's the case with FDA stuff. That's the case with grant writing stuff.
We can feel your passion. We really appreciate your transparency and honesty. It's so brave. Thank you so much. This has been incredible conversation, learning about this technology, the gap that you're filling, and the patients that you're going to be helping in the future is so
I think we can't
inspiring.
wait to have it in Europe, right?
100%.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, James.
Thank you for tuning into our MedTech Lives. You have been listening to Zilka Rima and Tash Ikran. We're committed to bringing you insights and stories that inspire and inform the medical community. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network.